Hey there, everyone. One of the great things about my job is that as soon as I think I have things figured out, the curveballs start flying. Some people might hate that, but for me, it keeps things interesting. It's almost like trying to solve an ever-changing puzzle. So, roll the clock back to September 18th when the Fed came out with a 50 basis point rate cut. And everyone applauded the Federal Reserve for being aggressive and trying to get ahead of any potential recession risks. And wouldn't you know it, as soon as the Fed took decisive action, the black swans started flying. You had Hurricane Helene. That wasn't even on the radar screen on September 18th. It actually started forming on September 21. Then it rolled through several states, creating severe wind and water damage. Then there was the escalation in the Middle East conflict, followed by the East Coast port strike, and on top of that, Hurricane Milton formed up and took aim at Florida. And then there's the employment report that came out on October 4th. And that's what I want to focus on today. That was a real curveball. Not only did it come in stronger than expected, with 254,000 jobs created in September, but it was accompanied with revisions to the July and August numbers, adding another 72,000 positions. And at the same time, even though the labor force grew by 150,000 workers, which is great, the strength of job creation blew through that, taking the unemployment rate down to 4.1%, which incidentally took the SOM roll back down to 50, which is literally teetering on the edge of a recession signal. But based on what we're seeing, and as Claudia Sahm said herself so very well, we're not in recession territory, at least not now. So at the September 18th press conference, Chairman Powell came out and said that inflation is moving the right direction and its trajectory should carry it to the Fed's 2% target. And he said the Fed is increasing their focus on the softening employment market. Then, 16 days later, the new jobs report came out and the signs of job softening have dissipated. Another noteworthy data point from the jobs report was a bump up in average hourly earnings, which increased to 4%, a 4-month high. And all those positive employment numbers pretty much took people's expectations of a 50 basis point rate cut by the Fed on November 7th off the table. And in my opinion, even a 25 basis point reduction in November may be a bit optimistic. I was already a bit skeptical that the Fed would reduce rates 2 days after the election, but this jobs report may drive the Federal Reserve to hit the pause button. Now, before all these curveballs breed negativity, let me flip this around for a minute. First, I need to point out that inflation is on a clear downward trend. And it still looks like core PCE is still on track to reach the Fed's target of 2%. Second, all those black swan events I mentioned earlier will distort the economic data over the short term, but at this point, they're unlikely to materially change the long-term trajectory of inflation or the economy. And third, we should never forget that adding jobs is positive for commercial real estate. And even though the additions for September were greater than expected, perhaps causing the Fed to be more cautious, adding 326,000 jobs, which includes the revisions from July and August, will create housing demand, increased consumption for retailers, increased warehouse throughput, and maybe, just maybe, some of those new jobs will put people back in offices. And with regard to the uptick in average hourly earnings, when you look at the longer-term metric of the 3-month moving average median hourly wage growth, you can clearly see the inflation cycle peak in the summer of 2022 and clear downward progress since then. So even though we've had a lot of unanticipated news over the last 4 weeks and it's creating some bumpiness, we always knew there would be bumps and potholes in the economic road. But take a step back. What do the unexpected job numbers mean for real estate investors? Will they materially affect the commercial real estate outlook? Will they materially affect the Federal Reserve's rate decisions over the longer term? I don't think we're seeing a momentum shift here. We're seeing the normal bumpiness created by the data that we work with every day. Will the Fed cut rates in November? Maybe. But the probability that the overnight rate will be down by 100 basis points or more by June of next year remains high. And that's why we can't get caught up in the day-to-day news, and investors always need to keep their eyes on the horizon.